a couple of minutes. All right. Well, we're a couple of minutes past the hour, so I'll go ahead and begin. Good afternoon, everyone. Thank you for joining today. For those of you who don't know me, I'm Alana Bell, the Residential Buildings Coordinator at NASEO. And really quickly before starting, I wanted to go over some quick call logistics. So you may have already received a notification when joining the call, but I wanted to flag that we will be recording this meeting and posting it on the NASEO YouTube channel. For those interested in accessing it, please feel free to check out the YouTube channel. We'll have it updated within a few days. And then you can also reach out to either Maddie or I if you'd like to receive a notification for when the recording has been uploaded. And in terms of call structure, our webinar today will feature a panel of subject matter experts who will share insights on different types of enabling upgrades for long-term beneficial electrification. We'll first hear a brief presentation from each of our speakers about their respective fields and then shift into a broader panel discussion. So throughout our time, please feel free to drop any questions you may have for our speakers in the chat, and we'll move through them in the latter portion of our call. And with that all being said, I'll pass the reins over to Sarah Messbauer, the Deputy Director at the West Virginia Department of Economic Development's Office of Energy, who will be moderating today's panel. Sarah?
Thanks, Alana. It's my pleasure to be here today moderating today's discussion. And it's, of course, a true joy to have today's panelists joining us today from such a broad array of sectors that all intersect in this residential and energy efficiency space. As Alana mentioned, my name is Sarah Messbauer, and I am the Deputy Director of the West Virginia Office of Energy. West Virginia has a number of intersecting interests when it comes to beneficial electrification and the benefits and challenges that come to ensuring that we're able to enable our long-term and short-term benefits. We are a state that is in the process currently of engaging in multiple programs and initiatives to increase the rate of electrification within our state. One of the things that makes us especially unique is that among states, we have one of the highest rates of residential homes without a central heat source. Some of the estimates on state data are that as many as 10% of West Virginia's homes don't have a central heat source, compared to a national average of around 1 to 2% in other states. So it's certainly a challenge. When it comes to electrification of those homes and increasing the percentage of electrification of other homes, we also are encountering the very common challenge of a lot of other states when it comes to transmission and distribution concerns. We are a state that struggles with resiliency. We have one of the highest rates of electric outages in West Virginia and some of the longest duration outages in the United States. And our home energy rebates program is going to rapidly increase the duration and scope of electric usage among our populace. We're expecting electricity usage among residents in West Virginia to triple by 2050. And this is something that is coming on the heels of prospective reductions in generation. We're currently the fifth highest generating state, but with proposed closures of some of our generating plants, which are currently coal-fired, we're looking for ways to increase our generation capacity, maintain our generation capacity, and maintain our electric reliability, all while increasing electrification access in ways that provide those long-term benefits. So West Virginia reflects a lot of other states in the U.S. We have some of our unique challenges. And I think in many ways that makes today's discussion especially relevant for us, especially with these cold months coming right down the road. We just had the winter forecast discussion that NASEO co-hosted, which was absolutely fascinating. So I think today's presenters are going to provide some really interesting insights, not just on how we distinguish long-term from short-term benefits when it comes to electrification, but also some of those topics that we maybe don't consider as frequently when we're working on our programs so diligently when it comes to things like home energy rebates, solar for all, and those more specific funded grants. So thanks again to our panelists. Thanks to our attendees. And with that, I will dive right into introducing our speakers for each of their initial presentations. So as Alana mentioned at the outset, we'll have each speaker give just a brief overview of their perspectives on today's topic before we dive into a general question and answer session. So first, we're going to be hearing from Curt Rich. He is the president and CEO of the North American Insulation Manufacturers Association. And he'll be speaking about the kind of broad topics of insulation and also giving some of those big picture views on today's topic. So Curt, why don't you take it away?
Thank you, Sarah, and thanks for having me, Alana. I want to just briefly touch on 3 points today. The first is that building envelope efficiency is a significant contributor to grid scale load management, as well as in managing any potential negative impacts from electrification at the household level. Second point I want to touch on is that with the advent of the IRA incentives for building efficiency, demand side incentive programs for utilities should become increasingly attractive. So want to touch on that, and then finally, I want to kind of circle back that and make the point that without really strong market education, we're going to continue to have a real hurdle to uptake on all of these programs and really take advantage of the opportunity to drive retrofit energy efficiency. So let's begin with utility benefits. Insulation delivers consistent electricity demand reductions. More efficient envelopes will always reduce demand during peak hours, although that will vary by region, with higher peak demands seen in heating climates and lower in cooling climates. Depending on building type, those savings can be 10 to 15%, so pretty significant. And that's for buildings like office buildings, retail space, as well as single-family detached homes. As Sarah had mentioned, the kind of increased demand on the electric grid, and as our system increasingly electrifies, it's these kind of savings that are going to be more meaningful for utility planning and grid management, particularly at peak times. Peak emissions are typically dirtier than base load, and so reducing peak load demand is going to be critical for states and regions meeting their environmental objectives. So this first slide is from the Consortium for Energy Efficiency. And it lays out the impact of electrification in Minnesota with and without weatherization, so building envelope improvements. And really, the blue portion of this graph, it tells the entire story. Electrification without weatherization on existing building stock in Minnesota will increase energy costs for everyone, virtually everyone. You can see a couple of little blips there down to the left, but really the impacts are far-reaching. Conversely, the yellow portion of the graph demonstrates that if you weatherize in conjunction with electrification, you can significantly mitigate those cost impacts or even reduce utility bills. This is not just a Minnesota story. I think this is a story for all northern climates. And certainly a story that state energy offices ought to be mindful of as we drive efforts to replace gas-fired heating with heat pumps. The next slide is we had ICF do some work for us analyzing the role of insulation in reducing peak load demand. I know it's a busy chart, but it really shows that insulation, when combined with grid interactive efficient buildings, have a real positive impact on daily energy demand usage, both in the summer and winter seasons. And grid energy efficient buildings are those buildings with smart technologies to optimize energy use for grid services, occupant preferences, and cost. So this slide details there are two prototype buildings, one in Atlanta, one in Detroit. So hot weather climate, cold weather climate. Two levels of efficiency, one kind of roughly correlating to the envelope requirements of the 2009 IECC, the other to the 2021 IECC. The higher insulation level, that 2021 IECC is upgrade 1. The lower is upgrade 2. And what this chart shows is that there are appreciable energy savings across all building types in all climate zones. When it comes to cooling energy reductions, those highest reductions are seen in single-family detached homes at around 12%, while kind of the lowest reductions are in single-family attached units at only 3%. When you're looking at kind of heating load and demand reduction, you're seeing about 5% in multifamily buildings with 2 to 4 units, and then a high of 12% in single-family attached homes. So again, this just underscores that the building envelope efficiency is highly effective in reducing that peak load demand. The second point I wanted to just touch on briefly was utility demand side incentives. We are seeing, that after years of being excluded from utility demand side management programs, incentives for insulation and air sealing seem to be coming back into vogue. Utilities are increasingly able to get over their cost effectiveness thresholds. We've done some analysis with ICF on this trend, and really what they point to is the increased federal incentives making that cost effectiveness determination kind of more persuasive. So we expect that as the tax rate rebates combined with the tax credits continue to kind of come into use in the market, you're going to see those upfront cost barriers come down. And utilities should be able to use that to then stack their own incentives on top to drive insulation upgrades. And then just the final point I wanted to make is that it's not just enough to have these incentives. You really need to be aggressive in marketing the incentives. We've now had the enhanced 25C. That's the homeowner retrofit tax credit in effect for a year. The IRS released data on taxpayer claims under this new credit for 2023. For insulation, it was 600,000 tax filers claimed the credit for insulation upgrades. Sounds like a big number, but it's not a great number. Back in 2010, when the 25C credit was temporarily increased to levels similar to the current credit, there were 3.5 million tax filers took advantage of the credit for insulation in 2010. And the difference between then and now is that there's really no muscle memory among contractors for really marketing this credit. So the public awareness is low. Again, kind of a pitch to utilities. I don't think there is a They are probably the most effective marketer of these incentives. They have a relationship with with every household in your state. And so, as we look to continue to drive uptake of the tax credit, uptake of the rebates that are going to be coming online, I think it's going to be really important to really work with utilities, work with others to be very aggressive in marketing these incentives and their benefits to the general public. Sarah, I'll wrap up there.
Okay, thank you so much, Curt. Really interesting information, especially about those differences in the ITC numbers. That's some really stark differences there, and certainly illustrates the importance of communication, because if people don't know about programs, it doesn't matter how good of a program you offer. And that brings us really nicely into our next presenter. That's Naveed Ahmad. He's speaking with us from Schneider Electric. He is the Business Development Manager for Home and Distribution, and he's going to be speaking with us on the topic of electric panels and rewiring. So Naveed, take it away.
Thank you, Sarah, and thank you, NASEO, for the opportunity to be here. So I think part of today's discussion is to talk about the benefits of electrification. So I wanted to first start with, okay, what benefits is a homeowner getting if they're electrifying their property? And electrification can allow a homeowner to install solar to produce their own energy, add battery storage if they want backup power and tied with the grid. If they just want to add charging to their home to charge their EV, or they want to upgrade to an all-electric and oftentimes more efficient appliance. So all of these are good things, but what also comes with these sort of beneficial electrification activities that homeowners are doing? There's a lot of data out there about what this means, so taking out even what's happening on the commercial side with data centers, just residential electricity demand, we're seeing that it's expected to increase 10% by 2030, which is significant if you look at load growth historically. Additionally, right, and I know we've got a lot of folks from different states, a lot of the homes in your different areas, they're older homes with electric infrastructure that can't support all of these great things that we're seeing on the left. And there's a study that from a think tank that we like to cite, Pecan Street, that says, up to 48 million homes across the United States are going to need some sort of electric panel or electric service upgrade in order to accommodate. So it's important to note that while there are benefits with electrifying a home, it is a challenge without the proper electric infrastructure. So then that brings me to this map that I'm showing. And really, the intent of this map is to just help you understand, if you're not familiar with Schneider Electric, why is Schneider Electric here and ready to take on this challenge? So, Schneider Electric is a 150-year-old plus company. A lot of people sometimes will be like, wow, I've never heard of them, because often people never thought about their electric panel until recently. But Schneider's been doing business in the U.S. across the country for over 100 years. We've got X number of employees. And I also want to highlight some of these brands that you might have heard of, that contractors in your states have heard of, Square D, for example, as well as installers like Q-Merit. These are all entities that are owned by Schneider Electric and are part of our portfolio. And I share all of that to share because, the number one leader across North America in terms of residential electric panels is Schneider Electric. So we've been innovating in the load center space and have been preparing for this moment where we want to help our residential, all these homes electrify to yield all the benefits. So additionally, I know we're going to talk about a lot of different programs potentially, but I want to just share that, one of the items that we're excited about are the home energy rebates that are coming out some states, have already released them to the public, and we're seeing an influx of states getting ready to release their home energy rebates to the public. So we wanted to share 3 key recommendations, and happy to talk more about these in the Q&A section. So number 1, because we see the state energy offices having a choice, we recommend that first, allow the full rebate funding for electric panel and wiring. So $4,000 and $2,500 respectively. Sometimes a lot of the other assets, for example, like a heat pump or a heat pump water heater, homeowners are realizing that while they may enjoy the discount for the heat pump or the water heater, they're being told by their electrician that they're going to have to upgrade their panel because it's an older home to accommodate that electric appliance. So we really see the panel as the heart of a lot of these benefits. So allow the panel and the wiring to also be discounted at the point of sale. Additionally, we at Schneider, what we've seen, and we've done some focus groups in 2024 around this, is installers are hesitant to execute these programs because they're going to have to bear the point of sale discount at the point of sale. So if it's a $15,000 job and they have to discount it to $11,000, even if they can collect the rebate on the back end, they're hesitant because that's now hurting their cash flow. And oftentimes these businesses are mom and pop shops that have, low margin anyway. We at Schneider, because we've been working in this electric panel and electrification space, are ready to help assist with that. So we ask state energy offices, allow manufacturers such as us who work in electric panels and with qualified installer networks like Qmerit to be approved contractors as well. So we can help contractors focus on installing. We can handle all the rebate paperwork on the back end. And, the DOE language does allow for third-party entities, to do that, so long as both the homeowner and the contractor sign off on it. So these are just some recommendations that we wanted to share, some real tactical recommendations for the folks who are here from the state energy offices. And thank you for this intro and look forward to the conversation.
Thanks so much, Naveed. Really appreciate the focus on tangible takeaways that can lead to those beneficial outcomes for that long-term electrification project. To segue into some of the topics that you were touching upon in the early slides, including solar, we are going to transition our discussion to rooftop solar. And specifically, we're going to be speaking with Zach Franklin, the Chief Strategy Officer for Grid Alternatives. So Zach, take it away whenever you're ready.
Thanks, Sarah, and thanks everyone for a great conversation so far. Just by means of introduction, I'm Zach Franklin. I'm with Grid Alternatives. We're a national climate equity nonprofit. We deploy solar and other kinds of clean energy technologies, communities that could benefit the most, but sort of have least access in the traditional marketplace. We're here to talk about rooftop solar as a enabling upgrade. And I really appreciate maybe how you kind of queued that up. But really about how all these technologies, but also all these programs can work together more seamlessly for the benefit of everybody involved. So if you can go to the next slide, I think we've been spending a lot of time as an organization on this question of, why pair rooftop solar and increasingly what we're doing because of a variety of factors, both policy and technological, pairing solar storage technologies and why pair that with beneficial electrification. And, we've talked to a lot of our kind of environmental justice allies in the space and heard over and over again 2 big equity concerns about the broader question of home electrification. One is that, folks' electric bills are going to increase significantly with the adoption of new electric loads. And then particularly for folks who may currently be using multiple fuels, their resilience risk could increase. You're putting kind of all of your energy eggs in one basket, at least for folks who are lucky enough now to have sort of a diversified energy portfolio, powering their home. And so we really found that, these align very well with sort of the solar and storage programs that we implement, both in California, where we're headquartered, but also across the country. And as we'll talk about more, I think the timing is good as we kind of roll out not just the home rebates through Inflation Reduction Act, but also the Solar for All program. We'll talk about a little bit more. And so, in our organization, really looking at integrating our solar and storage equity programming with electrification programs, not just to address these issues around cost burden and resilience, but also to make sure that we're powering these new loads with clean energy. And then kind of going back to Naveed, what you were sharing, kind of unlocking sort of synergies, particularly around funding for panel upgrades, right? Oftentimes there's a variety of different funding sources for different technologies, all of which depend on a panel upgrade. So the more you can bring different programs together, the more you can pool resources for that shared need. And then when it comes to rooftop solar in particular, one of the benefits of integration has to do with system sizing. Generally speaking, if you install rooftop solar, it's not a particularly easy thing to come back later when you've added a bunch of additional electric loads to your home and add a couple of more panels to sort of accommodate the additional load, both in terms of the construction side, but also in terms of, equity programs and how the funding is available. So by kind of doing everything together, you can really have a much better sense of that projected future load in an all-electric future and size a rooftop solar PV array accordingly. So that's kind of on the sort of programmatic benefits side, but there's also kind of a logistical benefit of an integrated approach. With Inflation Reduction Act programs, we're starting to see a good problem, a problem we've been wrangling with in states like California that have a lot of state level programs, which is, sort of jokingly say, the good news is that there's a lot of great programs, and the bad news is there's a lot of great programs, and sometimes they can get confusing for me to navigate it, and I, get paid to think about this stuff. So if you imagine the sort of regular household just trying to live their lives, it can be kind of overwhelming. And so integrating program delivery not only has these sort of technical benefits, but also kind of a social benefit for streamlined service delivery. And that really benefits everybody involved in project implementation, certainly community members, by not forcing them to kind of go to 3 different programs and, in a worst case scenario, prove that they're poor 3 different times just to get access to these resources. So it gets a more streamlined experience for the community, more streamlined experience for contractors. In some cases, you can have contractors working on multiple interventions and or at least coordinate that work. And then on the government agency side, not just in the context of better outcomes, but also from a client acquisition standpoint. Oftentimes we see programs where you have a solar program over here and they have a client outreach and acquisition strategy, and then an electrification program over here and they have a different strategy. But obviously, the more you integrate the programs, the more that, one client for one program becomes a client for the other program. And so that's, these are all wins for equity and these are all wins for efficiency. You don't always see the ability to kind of check both of those boxes at the same time. And so that's why we feel like integration of solar and storage with electrification programs has such promise. So if we can go to the next slide, on our organization, where we're going to be kind of really rolling this out, and I put the map up here so that for folks who are from some of the states in dark blue, I'm happy to connect offline, but it's an opportunity regardless, since we're just one of 60 Solar for All programs. We led a coalition of affordable housing organizations, primarily, a couple of other nonprofits as well, that was awarded just under $250 million through the Solar for All program at the EPA. We're going to be deploying no-cost solar mix of income qualified single family homes and multifamily affordable housing developments across 29 states and territories. It's not precluded that we can serve other states as well, but even with 29 states and territories, that's not a huge amount of money to spread across that geography. So these are certainly going to be our focus areas. Um, but yeah, again, as folks know, there's just one of 60 solar for all programs, all of which have at least the opportunity to take a similar approach in terms of integrating these solar resources with your existing and new electrification programs. We were very excited last week to get our final approvals from the EPA before the holidays and the administration change. So we're gearing up to start rolling these resources out in 2025. And again, that's our vision. We're partnering with Rewiring America specifically on trying to support this type of sort of streamlined connection between electrification programs and our no-cost solar offering under Solar for All. I know many of your state offices collaborate with Rewiring America, but certainly eager to both collaborate with individual state energy offices as appropriate to make sure this is a reality, and also to just coordinate so that these resources don't get rolled out in a way that creates confusion in the marketplace compared to other, solar for all programs that may be running at the state level in the same jurisdictions. So we're super excited to work with, states to operationalize this strategy, and definitely happy to connect with folks offline to discuss further and since that's of interest. So it's a simple message. I'll leave you with this sort of last visual, which is my favorite picture of the world that I think, many of us are working towards. But I always like this quote, author William Gibson, the future is already here. It's just not evenly distributed. I think for the first time, we have all the technologies available to, realize beneficial electrification in a way that works well for people's day-to-day needs, is economical, is effective, is reliable. And so now we have just a question of how do we distribute that equitably across all of our communities. So I really appreciate the time and excited for the conversation to follow.
Thanks, Zach. So I'm seeing a question in the comments about whether or not Solar for All will be rolled out in tranches like home energy rebate programs or in a single contract with awardees. Solar for All will be rolled out in a single contract. If you have a planning period, you're going to do the planning period first, and then there will be kind of a separate budget for implementation. But individual awardees can structure it how they wanted to. So if you were doing kind of tranches within your implementation period, then you could structure your budget appropriately. But it's not going to be rolled out in tranches the way that rebates was. I say was because there's been chatter about them getting rid of tranches for some of the future rollouts for some of the awardees for rebates. I don't know that has been 100% confirmed, but Solar for All is not going to have the same firm tranche structure that rebates had. So just to answer that question for Chase. So thank you to all of our speakers. Though that was a really fascinating and very diverse set of perspectives on the entire ecosystem of beneficial electrification. There's certainly some points of continuity. A lot of the discussion had to do with demand side management and trying to flatten that peak demand curve and just really lessen the impact of that for residential customers, and really lessen the impact of that for utilities as well, and what they have to bear on the generation side. So just making it a better process for the entire energy ecosystem through beneficial electrification. And so I want to work into our questions, and we'll start with just one that I prepared while the questions from the audience start rolling in. And one that I wanted to roll into with our panel has to do with this question of long-term beneficial electrification. The panel was convened today to discuss long-term beneficial electrification for these kind of large-scale residential electrification projects like home energy rebates, like Solar for All. And what for the panelists, is the difference between short-term benefits and long-term benefits when it comes to these kinds of initiatives? How would you define long-term benefits for residential customers?
And maybe I'll jump off because I think envelope efficiency is really kind of foundational. It is typically life of the building. So you insulate your home, and you're gonna have those benefits delivered for 30, 40, 50, 60 years. We are focused on kind of more of a retrofit discussion today. The big challenge is really you have one opportunity to really get the house right, the building right, and that's at the time of construction. So, in an ideal world, all the states here would enforce updated codes, and we'd be building highly efficient homes from the get-go. But that's the perfect world. That's not the world we live in. But again, I think unlike the other technologies, the envelope efficiency is life of the building. So by very definition, it's long term.
Yeah, absolutely. Zach or Naveed?
Yeah, I can jump in. So I agree with Curt. I definitely think that insulation comes first if you're prioritizing, right, in a perfect world. So I agree. And there are so many benefits to that aspect. I'll add as well that, it's also important to meet a customer where they are. For example, a customer might be like, listen, all I want to do is install an EV charger and I just need to get it because I bought, a new Tesla or whatever new car is, and I want to be able to charge it at home. And what happens is once they start to unpack what that really means, then they're being told, oh, wait, if I want to put in a level 2 charger, now I have to upgrade my panel, and it sort of starts to unlock all these other things. So one thing about the panel, right? I do think it's important to meet the customer where they are, so that upgrading every customer to a 200 amp service isn't always the solution. And in fact, in some parts of the country, Northern California being one of them, if you start having that conversation, the utility will then come back and say, well, that's triggering a utility side upgrade, which will be $20,000 to $30,000, and you're going to have to wait a year, right? Which then brings up other conversations. So meeting the customer where they are and understanding what they want to do. Some customers, they are really hurting from their bill and they want to save money on their bill. So insulation is a great opportunity to do that. Also, sometimes replacing a furnace with a heat pump is a great opportunity to see those cost savings, but it depends on where they are. Sometimes a customer is like, I really don't like working with my utility, and I want to be able to not only cut my bill, but have a little bit more of that independence. Well, that may actually trigger a solar conversation, right? And a solar and battery conversation. So I think it's good to look at all options, but sometimes customers want something specific. And that's why understanding the full scope of options is a good item. Now, I saw another question about, does the Schneider smart panel and other smart panels qualify for funding? My high level answer is yes. There's nothing in the language from the DOE or in what we're seeing being rolled out by states that precludes our panels from qualifying. So now if a state is going to release, a specific approved product list, maybe that would change. But yes, the answer is yes. As we're seeing right now in the market, all of our panels qualify for those funding dollars.
Zach, anything to add?
Yeah, no, I agree with everything that Curt and Naveed was saying. I think big picture, there's always sort of this tension between the short-term benefits and the long-term benefits, and ideally, you want to come up with a value proposition that's doesn't force you to choose, that doesn't create a tension between the immediate and the long term. I think that's one of the reasons, for example, when we structured our solar for all deployment, that we're doing a no cost offering as opposed to where a lot of the residential solar offerings are heavily finance based, where the sort of the long term benefits are a little bit more you know challenging to project out, and in a worst case scenario can be subject to some concerns around, is this financing structured in a way that is going to be beneficial over the long term? Unfortunately, there have been a lot of residential solar financial products out in the marketplace where that hasn't always been the case. And so I think, by embedding, what's clearly a very strong, I mean, basically when you're talking about, solar PV, you're talking about pre-purchasing, 25 or so years of electricity. And if you can use a subsidy source to really, buy down that cost, if not eliminate that cost, you can really make it clear that like you may not be able to like get you down to the penny about the long-term ROI, but you can make it clear that it's going to be really compelling. And so if you can pair the long term and the short term, the immediate kind of quality of life improvements, short-term savings with a very credible narrative around significant long-term savings that kind of address long-term housing affordability, I think you have a winning combination.
Yeah, so discussing the entire package of the short term and the long term together, and thinking of it holistically really helps. And thinking holistically about this, I'm seeing in the chat there's some discussion about, where do you start? What's first? Is it insulation? Is it air sealing? It's both. You got to do it all. And when we're talking about the residential market, one of the things that I think gets discussed some, but probably not enough, is the issue of energy audits, and getting energy auditors to come into play. They're required to have an energy audit as part of some of these grant programs we have coming in. But when it comes to beneficial electrification, having an energy audit, an energy auditor come into a home, they serve as a great front line to help educate people about the benefits of insulation, benefits of upgrading a service panel. They help to talk people through kind of where solar fits in the stack, and they kind of give people a to-do list, and they help sequence where in the progression of improvements, a homeowner can line things up and kind of, what do I do first, and then what do I do, then what do I do, based on the specific needs of a particular structure. And I know in West Virginia, one of our challenges is that we only have 25 residential energy auditors in the state of West Virginia. And with about 800,000 residential structures, the waiting list is about 48 years long to get a residential energy audit right now. So no bathroom breaks for any of our energy auditors, and no retirements. So one of the things that I wanted to ask all of you about on the panel was, what about workforce challenges when it comes to beneficial electrification? The idea of a robust and healthy workforce is perhaps one of the most important elements of this discussion, or kind of any energy initiative at all. So what do you think is a critical need that workforce efforts should start doing or keep doing to support the growth of local high quality jobs?
Yeah, it's a good question. I certainly don't want to attest to being a workforce development expert. Just a couple of other thoughts. One, I think I'll kind of zero in on these home energy rebates, right? I think it offers a great opportunity to accelerate and unlock, interest and opportunity. So the point I made, hey, for the state energy office, make sure to allow the funding for the panel. I will say also make sure it's available for the insulation, for the heat pump water heater, for the air, the space heating and cooling. Like, unlock it for every product, because then in turn, right, a contractor who maybe is really skilled in plumbing, right, and can do the heat pump water heater, they have an opportunity to tap in and provide that service, versus if you only have one solution. Yes, you might find a contractor who can do all of the above, but unlocking the rebates for all the products allows more contractors to be brought in. The other point I'll make is that, there are a lot of manufacturers such as Schneider Electric, and there's a number of them out there who maybe aren't as common in brand name, but allowing us to also participate and bring in our contractor networks. For example, Q-Merit is a contractor network that Schneider Electric owns. By allowing, a Q-Merit to be on these approved contractor lists, you're now bringing those contractor networks into the market and providing those resources to your, residents. So I think making space for manufacturers and also allowing the customer to pick what they want opens the door for then more jobs and more opportunities for the workforce.
So, Sarah, I think this is an enormous challenge in the market. We're not only expecting our contractor base to be, building science experts, installation experts, but also marketing pros. And, I just don't think there are many contractors out there that are able to effectively talk with the customer about all of these incentives that are out there, how you can stack these incentives to do multi-measure improvements to your home between tax incentives, the rebates that are coming online, utility incentives. So, I think there's a big contractor training need kind of out there as these programs get fully launched.
Yeah, I'll just double click that. Oh, go ahead, Sarah, please.
Nope, go ahead. Go ahead, Zach.
Yeah, I mean, I think one of the things that we found, we do a lot of workforce programming, and I think in some cases there can be a conflation of sort of workforce programming and contractor programming, which are tightly related but very separate efforts, right? And I think, one of the key strategies that I think a lot of folks, can tap into is identifying existing programs that just work with supporting small businesses already in your community, because some of these challenges are specific to clean energy, and some of it is just some of the universal challenges, particularly when we're talking about residential work, where the larger contractors tend not to do a lot of that sort of single family residential project work. We're talking about a lot of the mom and pops, and a lot of the barriers they have to participation relate to small business challenges. Naveed, you talked about just sort of like the cash flow, challenges on projects are not unique to these types of small businesses. And in many of your states and communities, there are existing, resources, programs to support small businesses. And so I think this is an area where there's a lot of upside, in addition to more traditional workforce development efforts, so that when they do grow their businesses to do more work for y'all, they got people they can hire to get another crew going.
Yeah, there's a great opportunity when an HVAC contractor is in a home to do equipment replacement, to kind of marry that up with insulation improvements. But HVAC contractors don't talk to insulation contractors. They're not used to working together. And just culturally, there's a lot of hurdles that we're going to have to be dealing with.
Have you seen any instances of groups or of states, of projects, of programs that have done things well related to workforce or to other elements of beneficial electrification that you feel are worth highlighting in this space?
I'm not close enough to the contractor base. I'm sure there's folks here on that call who have great examples, though.
I will say that we've done some state level kind of program development and implementation in the solar side of things, where we've had success kind of trying to align and integrate the contractor development and the workforce development piece into some programming. And so there's a income qualified rooftop solar program that we've administered for decade and a half for the California Public Utilities Commission, where for some of the projects, we contract with local small businesses, and as part of getting those contracts, they're required to hire a local job trainee from a list of local, community colleges and job training programs as part of their paid workforce, where we are ultimately funding that opportunity through the project side of things. We're making it a mandate, so it's a level playing field. We're helping people identify potential candidates to do that. But ultimately, what you end up doing is funding sort of a paid field interview for potential staff. I think a lot of folks have a hard time identifying which potential kind of new hires might stick, have what it takes. This is not necessarily like the kind of thing you're going to identify always with a paper resume. Sometimes the way you find out about if someone's going to be a good long-term hire is sort of this catch-22 is having an opportunity to work with them. And so that's a model that we've had some success with. There's very few times in government programs where you have contractor requirements and mandates where they come back later to you and say thank you. It's usually like a pill they have to swallow to get the job. And so we've had some good positive feedback from contractors with that model, as long as we're making sure that the additive cost is covered by the program.
I'll add some perspective from a manufacturer's side. So I do think you'll see that manufacturers have like a lot of times their own qualified network. And what happens is a lot of these contracts have their preferred products, right? So oftentimes a homeowner might call a contractor and they may want a certain type of heat pump because maybe they saw it on the list, and that contractor will be like, well, I only install this manufacturer, right? Why? Because maybe they're in that contractor network, or they might just feel comfortable with that product, right? So that's why I think it's important to also bring manufacturers along, because some of the things that we're doing even at Schneider, which is interesting, right? So we've been in the electric panel business for decades. Now we're getting into the backup battery and inverter space, right? So we haven't been in that space up really formally until now. So what we're trying to do, and I threw it in here, and you can Google any manufacturer, and they probably have a certification program. We're trying to upskill solar installers who maybe are very familiar to install solar and battery, and we're trying to educate them on how to do a panel upgrade as well, right? So if that solar installer is going out to do a job and all of a sudden that home requires a panel upgrade, they can also do the panel upgrade and hopefully, utilize our products. So obviously we have a vested interest in upskilling contractors from other areas so they can sell our product in, but at the same time, it also is pulling them into jobs that maybe they historically haven't done, as the whole home electrification trend is becoming more and more of a thing, right? So now somebody maybe isn't just wanting a HVAC replacement when it breaks. They're actually thinking, hey, I want to have an all electric home. And contractors are starting to see the value of being able to do more than just one vertical, right? So,
Yeah, absolutely. There is a question in the chat from Chase about successful messaging or awareness campaigns on the benefits of beneficial electrification. And it seems like Chase is looking for examples from other states. So other participants on the call, if you have information or advice to share with Chase, I encourage you to pop that in the chat. And we can also collect that information to share with people after the call. So I encourage you, if you just have any information or have seen a website that looks really cool and kind of easy to understand, please do share that information with us. Just understanding the constraints on time and wanting to be respectful of people's time. I wanted to ask our panelists if there's a final takeaway or message that you want people to walk away with after today's discussion on beneficial electrification. What would you want to share with people today? And Zach, let's start with you.
Yeah, I would just say, yeah, the extent you can have an offering where folks can get the sandwich and not have to piece it together with the bread and the meat and the cheese and all the other kind of stuff on their own, I think people are going to like that sandwich.
It's a great analogy, Zach. And Naveed?
Yeah, I would say, this is the right mix of folks, right? Talking, state energy officials, association groups, manufacturers. I think we all need to be talking to each other and working closely together and being patient with each other in order to deliver value for our residents. So I definitely think this is the right sort of environment that we need to continue to foster.
Thank you so much, Naveed. And Curt?
Yeah, I'm going to paraphrase Ken and Amanda in the chat. It all begins with insulation and air sealing. So I appreciate those comments. Congress, when they authorized legislation for the electrification rebate program, they did one really smart thing. They made insulation an eligible electrification measure, and I think that just underscores the importance of insulation and air sealing before you undertake any electrification measures, particularly in cold weather climate zones.
Well, Curt, there was a reason that we started and ended the panel with you. So insulation to start and finish us off. Thank
I
you
love
so
it.
much to our panelists. It was great having you speak with all of us today and a pleasure to moderate. So I'll pass it back off to Alana to close us out.
Yeah, thank you, Sarah. And as I mentioned at the top of this call, we'll be uploading the recording for today's webinar within the next couple of days. Thank you again to our speakers, Zach, Naveed, and Curt. And thank you, Sarah, for moderating this wonderful panel. Yeah, great. We'll wrap it up. Thank you, everyone.
Thank you.